Welcome back to my channel, where today I'll be guiding you through understanding yarn weights. My objective is to explain the difference in yarn weights for use in yarn crafts and guide you in using this information to improve your crochet skills. We're going to start off talking about what exactly yarn weight is, move into discussing briefly why it's important. I'm going to talk about how to measure it, then we're going to give you a breakdown of each yarn weight before talking about yarn substitution as a whole. So what is yarn weight? Yarn weight refers to the thickness of a yarn strand, not how much it weighs on a scale. In essence, it's a way to characterize different yarns, namely based on their relative thicknesses. If you want like a great summarization slide or summarization sort of general rule of thumb, I would say that the higher yarn weights equals thicker yarn and that the lower yarn weights results in thinner yarn. So now that we have that out of the way, why exactly is it important? Well, it helps to maintain a universal standard that ensures that the results are consistent as well as accurate. This is similar to concepts like gauge and hook size. You can kind of think of it as a form of quality control, right? So if we all are on the same page, if I tell you to go out and make and replicate a certain item and I give you a what is a crochet ingredients list of everything that you need, including hook size and what kind of yarn that you want to use, you're going to be able to go out and have great success and a great chance of being able to replicate it because of this fact. So you can kind of think of it like that, where it helps even the playing field and make sure that your results are going to match my results if you want them to. So next, how to measure yarn weights. There is two primary ways that we're going to talk about. The first, pretty self-explanatory. It's just looking at the label. I do have a video that goes over how to read a yarn label if you've ever looked at the back and kind of just like scratched your head a little bit. So you can check that out. But there's usually on the back of it going to be like a skein icon, and it's going to have a number. In the picture you can see there's a number 3. And that's pretty much going to be your yarn weight. But what do you do if maybe you don't have the label for whatever reason? That's where WPI comes in handy. So if your yarn weight, maybe the label is missing, or maybe you just want to check just to see that you have a good handle on it, you can use the wraps per inch or the WPI method. It refers to the number of times that yarn can be wrapped around something. So think like a ruler, a pencil. You can even do your crochet hook. I mean, you're going to be crocheting anyway. And within that length of an inch, however many times it can wrap around whatever it is, that's going to correspond to a specific yarn weight. In this picture, and it was in the previous slide too, with where they have these little tools where it actually has a notch that's a full inch long, and you can just wrap your yarn around it, and then on it right there is going to be on the side going to be corresponding to however many times it wraps, whatever the yarn weight is. So that's pretty convenient if you wanted to get that for yourself, but you don't have to. You could always just use, like I said, a crochet hook, a ruler, a pencil, and then once you wrapped it around that number of times within an inch and you got whatever that number is, you can use a chart like one of these, and there should be a wraps per inch section, and that would correspond to like whatever the yarn weight is. It is important though to note there's going to be slight variations across different charts for different reasons, whether it be that they have this chart is, oh, you're wrapping it around a pencil, or versus a ruler, which might have different thicknesses themselves and thus lead to the wrap number being different. So cross-reference it and make sure that you're reading like notes and things like that might be important considerations before you go and convert it. With experience and time, you get good at just, let's say, feeling or looking at a yarn and being able to tell, like, that's probably a weight 4, that's probably a weight 5, that's probably a weight 1. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get to the yarn weight breakdown. I'm going to be giving you each yarn weight. I'm going to go from 1 to 6, although 7 is also one that's going to exist, and I'll cover that briefly. And I'm going to tell you what it's made of generally, the uses for it, as well as the weight type. It's important to note that these are here for summarization purposes. They are accurate, but within those you will have where like I might not list a certain material, or there's a use that you can use for this yarn and I didn't put it there. So I just want to make that, known before we get started. So first up we have lace yarn, or yarn weight 0. This is lightweight, usually made of silk, cashmere, merino wool, etc. You can use it for dainty pieces like I don't know if you've ever seen those table runners where they're like nice and lacy and they have the different designs, and I don't know, they just look very intricate. Those sorts of things. Or you could even mix it with a heavier weight yarn and it'll give you a really nice texture and or color variation depending on like what kind of yarn you decide to use there. Next up we have fingering weight yarn or yarn weight 1. Another name that you might find this as is sock yarn. It's also lightweight, made of things like wool, cotton, or a blend. You can use it for making, socks or things like shawls. We have sport weight or weight 2 yarn. This is where we're getting more into our medium weight, made of things like wool, cotton, or a blend. You can use it for making things like sweaters, baby clothes, and blankets. There's DK weight yarn or type 3 yarn, made of things like wool, cotton, or a blend. You can use it to make sweaters, cardigans, hats, scarves. There's worsted weight yarn, which is made of wool, acrylic, or a blend. You can use it to make scarves, hats, and blankets. We have bulky or type 5 weight yarn. We're getting now into our heavyweight section, made of things like wool, alpaca, or a blend. You can use to make blankets, scarves, and hats. And then finally we have super bulky or weight 6 yarn, made of things like wool, acrylic, or a blend that you can use to make scarves, hats, and blankets. I mentioned that there is a type 7 weight yarn depending on your resource. Some stop at 6, some go all the way up to 7. Slightly thicker than a type 6 weight yarn, but you can make pretty much the same things. This chart I feel like does a pretty good job of summarizing the types of projects for each yarn weight classification. I would say that overall, whenever I recommend, like if you're starting, my advice and recommendation is to go with a nice middle of the weight type of yarn, thinking like a 3 or 4. It's going to be middle of the road for a lot of the good things and a lot of the bad things. And you can make generally like a pretty expansive list of different things. Then you can like graduate to other types of yarn. I would say that the hardest types of yarn to crochet with are going to be the thinner ones. Of course, it varies from person to person. Like you might meet someone who like they find it to be easier. But when you're at 0 and 2, it's thinner. So it's one, you're going to have to use smaller hook sizes, which might not be the best to start off on because they are so small and you have to get used to like how to hold the hook. Also, they're often made of materials that there's more slip to it, which also makes it harder to keep it on the hook. And it's going to take longer in general just because of that thinner size. Then you have the opposite sort of problem with heavier weight yarns, so like 5 through 7. They're really great because they work up very fast, but they are thicker and usually because of the fiber content have more friction that's involved. So I personally, like when I was first starting, didn't like it for that reason, and I found it because the hooks were like chunkier. I don't know, I didn't think it was a very good representation of helping me like hold it. So 3 or 4 really to like get you started, and then you can like decide what your preferences are. Next, we're going to talk about yarn substitution. So when we say the term yarn substitution, it's pretty much if something calls for a certain yarn and you either decide to or you have to use for whatever reason a different weight yarn. You might decide to substitute yarn if you want to change the size of your finished item. Maybe you don't have a specific yarn or yarn weight necessary for the given project. In any case, before you start your project, make sure that you make a gauge swatch. That's going to give you a really good idea of what the scaled size is going to be of your new yarn. Before all else though, aim to substitute with a yarn of a similar weight before anything else. So even if something calls for a certain thing and like before you go and you're like, oh, guess I gotta do yarn substitution, check in your stash to make sure that you don't have like a yarn that is of like the same weight, even if it's a little bit different, because it's gonna, like above all else, give you as similar results as possible without having to like change your yarn weights. So first we're going to cover substituting with a lighter yarn. So let's think if you maybe are going from a type 5 yarn to instead like a type 2 yarn. If you do this and you keep the needle size the same, your resulting fabric is going to end up being looser and having more drape. which sometimes that's, you know, like intentionally the choice that you want to make. Like you're making this substitution on purpose so that you can have that result. But if that isn't the case and you want to prevent this, I would say use a smaller size hook with your substitution, because that's going to then result in creating a smaller size item, which also might be your actual goal or aim for substituting yarn. Do note that you might need more yarn than you needed before with the original yarn if you do this. If we take the opposite case, let's say it calls for a type 2 yarn and you instead use a type 5 yarn, or substitute with the heavier yarn, then you keep the hook size the same, then this is going to result in the fabric being thicker and denser, and so it's going to have less drape. If you want to prevent this, then you want to change to a larger size hook, which will create a larger size item. Even so, these aren't the only 2 substitutions that you can make. You might decide that you want to use multiple strands instead of 1 strand. When you do this, you're essentially creating a chunkier or heavier weight yarn through combining lighter weight yarns, or a lighter weight yarn. Sometimes it's intentional because you want to make it to be chunkier just for the texture and the look. Sometimes, you might want to merge different strands of different colors to get that multicolored look. Another substitution, or is fiber content. And for this, the biggest consideration, obviously outside of the yarn weight, is going to be how it drapes and how it feels or wears. Different fibers are going to provide you with different variations of these factors. So the best course of action, I would say, is to do research before making the substitution. Because if you, let's say you're using an acrylic yarn and you kind of are curious about using like cotton, or maybe on the opposite side, you might want to use mohair or something. Even if you do the same exact pattern with the same hook size, you have the same tension and everything to make, let's say, a sweater, it's not going to be the same. If, let's say, it is the same yarn weight, it might be the same, in terms of sizing, but it's not going to wear the same because the different fiber contents will be they don't carry heat the same. They're going to touch, not be the same. You're going to have where your acrylics, like I said, very middle of the road. Once you get into cotton and lighter sort of fabrics, silk and all that, it's going to be more breathable. Once you get into mohair and wool and alpaca, really great for wintertime things because it holds heat very well. I don't know everything about every single fiber content, which is why I ultimately urge you, if you're thinking about changing and switching up your fiber contents, to do research on it. But it does make all the difference, I will say. Yarn weight is a classification system that's based on yarn thickness. With the basic knowledge of things like yarn weights, as well as the effects of yarn substitution, you can be able to expertly make game time decisions to make sure you aren't compromising the quality of your finished projects. Thank you so much for watching. If you got to this point and you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you want similar videos to this one, consider subscribing. Thank you so much again, and have a wonderful day.